So, hello, Orit. How are you?
Hi, Tom. I'm good, thank you.
Good. So, I'm here today with my good friend Orit Yasu. We've been friends since 2008, and Orit is a lawyer in Israel. Her parents were born in Ethiopia, Ethiopian Jews who came a year before Orit was born. They came, I think, if I remember correctly, in 1983, part of a big wave of migration of Ethiopian Jewish refugees. Although, for those of you who don't know, actually, the first Ethiopian Jews to come to modern Israel came already in 1934 through Italian-occupied Eritrea. And then there was more Ethiopian Jews that came between 1963 and 1975. But after the then new Prime Minister Menachem Begin came into power in the late 70s in Israel, he made a strategic decision to help bring the Ethiopian Jewish community in Ethiopia, who had long dreamt of returning to Israel, back to Israel. And there was the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, had to organize this. It was very, very complicated and dangerous. There was war, there was famine, there was lots of discrimination against Jews in Ethiopia. In fact, a lot of Westerners used to call Ethiopian Jews falasha, but falasha is actually a discriminatory term. It means kind of the other. It's not a very nice term. Anyway, you may have seen, some of you, on Netflix, a film that came out last year called The Red Sea Diving Resort. Not a particularly good film, but it's based on the airlift of thousands, tens of thousands of Ethiopian Jews to Israel. So let's ask Orit some questions now. So first of all, we're more than 2 months into the coronavirus lockdown period. How's it been in Israel?
Well, first, I am still working from home. So it's been like 2 months, or a little bit over 2 months, that I've been working in a distance. And I don't know when we're going to go back to work in the office. But other than that, I think that the Israeli government was one of the governments to react the fastest. And therefore, the results are that now we're one of the only countries that actually is coming out little by little, coming out of this emergency situation. So I think overall, like, it has been controlled and they dealt very properly by the Israeli government.
Yeah, the death toll has been one of the lowest per capita, I think, compared to many countries. Orit, let's go back a little bit to the beginning. Why don't we start with your parents? And I think I remember you're the youngest of 9 children. The other 8 were born already in Ethiopia. You're the first of the family from your parents to be born in Israel. So tell me a bit about your parents or your siblings.
Okay. So as you said, I'm the youngest out of 9. My parents obviously got married in Ethiopia, and they came through Sudan to Israel. And they stayed in a Merkaz Klita in the north, in Atlit.
And that's an absorption center for you.
Yeah, thank you. And they were there for about 3 years, and then they moved to Kiryat Malachi, where my grandmother was. So everybody goes where their mother is, especially in a new foreign country, and you want to be close to the rest of your family. So a lot of my mother's siblings moved also to Kiryat Malachi to be close to each other. And ever since, like, my family was there, and I grew up in Kiryat Malachi.
And just tell me, by the way, your name, Orit Yasu, is that's an Israeli name, not an Ethiopian name? Is that right? Or?
So Orit is a very common Israeli name, but it also have an Ethiopian meaning. In Ethiopian, in Ethiopia, the Bible is Orit, and it's actually also coming from Aramaic. So it's so it was very strange, I guess, for them to hear like such a sacred and like holy word used like as a name. So I guess that's why they chose probably that particular name to name me.
And the family name, Yasu?
Well, Yasu is Yehoshua, which is Joshua. So yeah, it's pretty common.
Traditional Jewish name. And was your childhood in Kiryat Malachi, was it a happy childhood?
Oh yes, and I always say when I speak to my friends anywhere around the world that I wish for my kids like to have more or less the same childhood for different reasons. Beside the fact of like the kids today are like glued to the TV, but it has so many things to offer, like the simple things. Like we had the fields, we had the groves that we could walk and travel to, and like we had this group of friends that we always like hang out together, and also we had a lot of extracurriculum activities that we participated. So yeah, overall we had like I know for sure not just me but all of my close friends from childhood had like a great
From what I know, Kiryat Malachi, it's a relatively low income town in the south of Israel, and it's also got quite a big Ethiopian population. From what I know, Ethiopian Jews live in at least 60 different towns and cities in Israel, but Kiryat Malachi has, I think, the highest proportion, something like 15 or 17% of the town are Ethiopians. And although it's not, let's say, the richest city, it's not like Tel Aviv or some richer cities in Israel, it's a kind of fun place to grow up then, is that right? Good sense of community?
Well, a few things. When I think any smaller place, it always has a greater and better sense of community. And also, yes, has proportionally, it has the largest Ethiopian community. And I would say that the municipality in Kiryat Malachi, at least when we were like, growing up, gave, again, as I said, so much to the future of the city. There were so many, as I said, extracurriculum activities that we could have participated, and a lot of them are involved, like performing, and it's just like enriching and enhancing you as a person, and it makes you grow as a person, and not just like in your everyday education, like your formal education. And part of it was also like you participate in different delegations. There is what they call twin cities projects. So you get to know different people from different places around the world, and this is how you widen your horizon from this little town, and this is your window to see like the world. At least back then. Now you have the internet, but it's different when you have one-on-one meeting with those different people and you communicate with them. So it was nice.
I remember you telling me that in fact you went, I think you said you were 15 at the time, the municipality sent you, you were one of the things you did, you were a good singer, so a group of performers or singers, they sent you from, as you put it, your little town in the south of Israel, age 15 to America. How was that trip? Do you remember it?
Of course. This is, every person has their like important moments in their life. So for me,
coming of age, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, this is definitely was I would say a turning point, because it was, seeing America when you're 15, like from this little town, beside the fact that it, it showed me different things that I've never encountered before, such as, we were hosted in California, we were hosted by 2 lesbians. It was something that I would have never encountered, like at least back then. So also like some other stuff, like how the use of weed back then was so also today, but back then it was totally different than it is today. It was so commonly used in California. It was so many, shocking things for us to experience, also the good stuff also. But everything that I said so far, it's also, everything is just, it's just open and mind opening and eye opening. And it makes you look, at everything like so differently. So.
I remember also you told me once before about that trip, and I think in addition to going to the West Coast, like California, Washington State, you were in Colorado, and your group ended up singing at that memorial for that famous or infamous Columbine school massacre. Was that right?
Yes, I remember that. That's one of the other things that was very horribly, a very significant moment, because it was horrifying. It was this was our first time to Colorado, and it was also snowing, which was also very strange for us. And at the same time, when we got there, we hear there was a massacre in high school, and people our age got killed by their friend from school. So it was so shocking for us. And at the same time, there was like a ceremony that was, made in their honor. So we took part in it, and we felt so proud and humbled to take part in such ceremony.
Yeah, no, the Columbine is a notorious, horrible massacre. Tell me, Orit, did you speak English already before that trip, age 15? You learned it at school, or how did you know English?
So I love music, I love songs, and I love to sing. And I remember from a very young age that I would listen to songs, using the tape, and I would press play to hear a whole, one line out of a song, and try to write down the words, and try to go and find it in the dictionary, and try to figure out the entire song word. So I've done it for quite a while, and that's how I got that's how I got to start speaking English and singing English first, actually singing and then speaking. And yeah, I got it before the trip. I had my,
thanks to MTV and stuff. And then, so like all Israelis, I guess after the school you did the army for a couple of years, the Israeli army, is that right?
Yes,
how was that?
That was also a very eye-opening experience. I served in the conflict territories, and it was the first time that I encounter a person who lives in the Palestinian authorities. And it's just, it's just giving you a perspective in life. And I think that's the main take from it's a it's a life lesson rather than a take, but it's a life lesson that I take with me for the rest of my life. And also it's those areas are one of the most beautiful areas in Israel, so I think it should be traveled more often than it is now.
And after the army, lots of Israelis, because it's quite intense, obviously being a soldier, it's compulsory, of course, to be a soldier for men and women in Israel. So it's quite common for Israelis to travel for a few months after the army. Lots of Israelis I know go to India or South America, but I remember you told me you went to the US again because you liked it. So is that right? You went to America after the army?
Yes, I love America. There is a saying, I like to travel overall, but in that particular time, I heard from someone saying, the first place a person travels to, that's the place he or she are going to travel the most, because that's when that's your first experience. So yes, I fell in love, and I still love the US, and I wanted to just go and travel.
Where were you in the US? Where did you visit?
My sister lives in the US, so I went to visit her, and then I also I did a small trip. I went to Philadelphia. I remember I was in DC, and we went to the White House, of course. It was, I remember it was so amazing to see how small the White House was.
Yeah, yeah. That was my impression. When I've seen the White House, I was also amazed how small it is. You know, it's the most powerful building in the world in some senses, and yet it's just a house, basically. A big one,
Exactly.
a big one, but not so big. Yeah. What else? Did you see anything else in Washington?
Yes, yes. I remember it was pretty new back then. The new Holocaust Museum, that was also a very significant visit, to see like this memorial like outside of Israel in the U.S. You know, it's very important to commemorate such things so they won't happen again.
Where else did you get my, I don't know if it's my favorite city, but the city I know best in America by far is New York, is Manhattan. Did you get a chance to look at that?
Of course, if you haven't been to New York, you've never been to the US. But yes,
I think, was it Frank Sinatra who said you haven't seen anywhere? So how did you find New York?
So New York was very interesting because I remember the first thing is the mass, okay? The mass of people walking down the street or crossing the road at the same time that you're crossing the road is something that like leaves you at awe, at least in the beginning, just as much as the huge concrete buildings. And I remember walking down the street and everyone is like, you know, it's very crowded and everyone is like trying to like find the way out, like, you know, find the way. And I remember walking and someone just, you know, walked in front of me and hit me. And it was a serious hit. And I was waiting for an apology. So I turned around, or at least let me give me the chance to apologize, or, you know, so I'm looking around and this person is just keep on going because he or she didn't have time to even, you know, apologize. So that was also a shocking experience because I was like, these people don't have time for anything.
It's a fast pace of life in Manhattan, I think, that's for sure. So then I remember you came back to Israel and then you studied university or college, right? Or you became a lawyer. Yes. Where did you study?
I studied in Ono Academic College. And while I was studying, I also participated in an exchange student program in Brussels. So I did one semester in Brussels. I studied European law. It was a very interesting experience too. A lot of beer in the campuses, which I'm not used to it, at least not in Israel.
Beer drinkers, not like Israel. Israel, you know, Belgian beers. Yeah.
I mean, they do drink in Israel, but not to the same. Yeah, it's not even close to the same.
In Germany or Belgium or Czech Republic, not like that. No. Yeah. And where else did you? What did you do work-wise after qualifying as a lawyer?
So in Israel, it's an undergraduate degree, and then you have to do 1 year of internship. So I did my internship in the district attorney office in Tel Aviv for a year. It was mostly about family law, and it was very about surrogacy and other topics that I felt very heavy. And I didn't want to, it made me want to change my path. And I always found business very interesting. And at the same time, in 2008, there was the financial crisis. That's when it started. It was very interesting to me to learn what happened in order to, make sense of it, like why something that happened in the States influenced the world and what happened. What made it happen. So it was very interesting for me to learn to understand what happened. So I decided to file for scholarship with Fulbright, and I received that scholarship. And I went and I started right after I finished my internship. I did the bar exam, which I passed. And maybe a day after, I flew to the States and started my MBA.
It did, if I remember, it was in Ohio, the MBA.
Mm-hmm.
We used to chat a lot. There wasn't really WhatsApp, but we stayed in touch by Skype during that period. I remember we had long chats while you were in Ohio. And then when you came back, what were you doing? I think you were teaching for a while, and then you worked for Israel Aircraft Industries as a lawyer. Is that right?
Yes. So when I came back, I taught in the academia in two different faculties, and two different colleges. Well, unfortunately, academia doesn't pay that good, so I had to find something else, and I started working for IAI, Israeli Aerospace Industries.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there as a legal advisor.
I do remember, I know it's slightly secretive, the work there, but I do remember you, at least you did travel a bit. I remember you WhatsApped me, I think, from India once on a work trip. At least you got a chance to have a glance at some other places while you were working.
I might have.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go back to Ethiopia for a moment, okay? I know you're born in Israel, but
yes.
Your parents and your brothers and sisters were born in Ethiopia. When you were growing up, did they speak much about how it used to be in Ethiopia?
Yes, they did speak about Ethiopia. But it wasn't something that was always discussed. And if we, let's say, if we talk about Sudan, it was even barely, mentioned.
I mean, the trip, because it's a harrowing trip through Sudan.
Yes, it was barely mentioned.
And although it's not the greatest film in the world, for those of you who might be watching, who have Netflix, I would recommend watching the new Netflix film. It's called A Red Sea Diving Resort. And the reason it's called that is the Mossad had to set up a whole fake holiday village to give them a cover to live for 1 or 2 years in Ethiopia, and every night they smuggled out hundreds of Jews usually by sea to waiting Israeli ships, and sometimes by air. And it was a dictatorship. It was very dangerous for the Jews, and unfortunately many people died on the way. So I do recommend watching that film. So I mean, for example, quite a lot of people died. Were your family okay on that trip? Your brothers and sisters?
Yes, fortunately enough, my entire family has, survived. Given into consideration that my mother had 2 babies, so it's not. We were fortunate enough. That's all I can say. And as you said, we're not. I mean, it was talking about Ethiopia was, a subject that we did talk about, but I think most of the time one of the things that resonate in the discussions that we have is more about my family and overall all the Ethiopian community being able to fulfill this 2,000 years dream of coming to Israel and living in Israel. This is something that they cherish so much and happy so much about it. That I think that's what matters the most for them, and that's why they don't even want to.
Historians and also religious scholars believe that the Ethiopian Jews are descendants of the lost tribe of Dan, one of the lost tribes of Israel, and it dates back to the age of the Queen of Sheba and so on. It's one of the actual oldest Jewish communities in the world, the Ethiopian Jewish community. Tell me, when they arrived to Israel, did they speak much about the difficulties, or maybe it wasn't difficult, of integrating into Israel? Your mom, your dad?
My father was wasn't young. So there was no way for him to try and even, try to put him in a,
that easily. Yeah.
Yeah, in some kind of a job or position. He was almost in like pension, age. My mother, on the other hand, she did have the chance to work a little bit, but then she had to stay home and take care of,
so many children. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know both your parents already passed away, which is obviously sad, because you're relatively young to have your parents pass away. What about, I remember I actually met some years later, I was friends with one of the Mossad agents who organized the Operation Moses, as it was called, bringing thousands of Jews. And he said that on one of the flights when they arrived, because later on they managed to also fly, because the government changed in Sudan. At the first part, the Sudanese were shooting at Jews, but later on they managed to airlift Jews out. So when they arrived at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, he got off the plane with Ethiopian Jews, and they saw some ultra-Orthodox, Haredi, black-hatted, traditional black-hatted Jews. And of course, that dress, those black hats, actually originate to Poland and Ukraine from about 200 years ago. And the Mossad guy I know said that the Ethiopian said to him, "Who's that? What's that?" And the Mossad guy goes, "That's a Jew." And the Ethiopian guy goes, "That's a Jew?" Because of course they were looking at this funny costume that ultra-Orthodox Jews have now adopted as their mode of dress, but actually it's relatively recent historically. It's a couple of hundred years ago from Poland, as I said. Look, for Ethiopian Jews, from what I know quite a number, and I've also read and so on, that there has been some difficulties, obviously, because a lot of the Ethiopians that arrived were even not literate, they couldn't read and write, they didn't speak Hebrew fluently. There was also, unfortunately, among some people in Israel, a certain degree of discrimination. So it was hard breaking into the housing market, in education, employment, and so on. But what I think, and we've discussed it in the past, is that lots of Ethiopian Jews have been very successful, including yourself. But I mean, you've had Ethiopian Jews who've been successful in popular things like sport and fashion and culture. You've had actors, you had Miss Israel, who was Ethiopian. This year's Israeli entry to the Eurovision Song Contest was a wonderful young Ethiopian female singer. Unfortunately, because of coronavirus, this month's contest in Rotterdam in the Netherlands has been postponed by a year, but she'll represent Israel next year. And of course, I know, because I follow Eurovision, that after Ireland and Sweden, Israel has won the Eurovision more than any other country. It's won 4 times with, Netta and Dana International and so on. But anyway, sorry, let me get to the point. Ethiopians have also been successful in what I would call more serious careers like media and politics. I mean, I don't know if politics is that serious, but it's considered serious. And, I know that already in 2012, there was the first ambassador for Israel who's Ethiopian, and there have been so far 8 members of the parliament, members of the Knesset who are Ethiopian, and the Israeli Knesset is quite small, it's 120 members, and it's very, very competitive, Israel. So 8 members is not bad. What I wanted to ask you though, is only one of those members was from the Labour Party, the kind of centre-left Labour Party. All the other 7 Ethiopian Knesset members were from either right-wing parties like the Likud, that's the party of Prime Minister Netanyahu, or Shas, which is another right-wing party, or they're from centrist parties like Yesh Atid, or in the past Kadima. And in fact, just this month, on May 15th, the first cabinet minister, who's an Ethiopian, was appointed in the new government of Netanyahu and Gantz, became Israel's first Ethiopian-born cabinet minister. And I was reading about her. She came She was born in 1981 in Ethiopia, and she came age 3 in the same wave of refugees that your parents and brothers and sisters came from the same province of Ethiopia in Operation Moses, and she walked across the Sudan, and her brother had to carry her on her back, and she said it was 50 degrees Celsius, centigrade, so it was very hot. There was a war, there was lots of shooting at Jews. The Mossad had to smuggle them out from the Sudanese military and so on. So obviously she's done very well that she's now not just a member of Knesset for a few years, she's now a member of the cabinet. So one question I have to start with is that, as I said, most of the Ethiopians, politicians, but also the Ethiopians I know, they seem to vote for parties of the right or the center. Is that your experience among your Ethiopian friends, and why is that?
Most of my Ethiopian friends vote for the right wing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's for a few reasons, but the main one is because it's aligned with their ideologies and values and what they believe. And the contrast reason is because the other side is seem to be one that may not include you as part of their agenda or part of their voters.
Are they a little bit elitist? Is that what you mean? Kind of some left-wing intellect?
That's different ways to say the same thing. Yeah.
Because I know also in Israel and indeed in other countries too, a lot of Jews from, let's say, poorer countries, Jews who migrated to Israel from Morocco or Yemen as well, also from the former Soviet Union, they also feel that the politicians or people on the left, which supposedly are more tolerant, are actually sometimes not so tolerant in reality, and therefore they feel a bit alienated from them. Do you think that's right also for lots of Ethiopians? Or?
So the left is pretentious. They may act tolerant, but their actions are not.
Okay, so Orit, just one final question. I remember that in 2015, you went to visit Ethiopia for the first time. You showed me all the great photos. I think you went with your sister. How was the trip? Tell me a little bit about the trip.
It was very interesting. First of all, I wasn't expecting to be awed by the amazing sceneries and views. It has big, huge mountains and a lot of green. And in my mind, as a child who her parents came through Sudan, I was about ignorant of thinking that it might be more brown than green. It's the freshest lake. There's some areas there that they're the best. That they have the best, the most freshest air that I've ever, breathed before. And overall, it was very interesting to see that, to go to the village where my family came from and see it. I didn't really feel very connected. I mean, it was very. I didn't. I was waiting to feel some sort of connections, but I guess because our roots at the end of the day are Jewish and they're Israel, and it is in Israel, then. I assume that's the reason that I didn't feel that, that...
There are no Jews left in that village, right?
Not in that village.
So, Orit, I think we're out of time, but that's been a really fascinating interview, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your friendship. I must say that it was lovely seeing your daughter, Sivan, last summer.
She's a sweetie, yes?
Yes, she is. She is lovely.
Yes, well, you'll see her soon again, I hope. Okay, see you soon and have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.